Each garage has its own unique story. These stories depict the interest, passions, and accomplishments of the individuals, inspiring the next generation by passing down the knowledge and technical skills to keep the passion alive. By pushing the limits of mechanically maintaining and displaying these moving works of art, we are preserving the history of the automobile.
My name is Christopher Longo. I race a 1968 MGB GT in the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. And I'm the owner of MGB Classics, where we restore, maintain, and help keep these classic British sports cars on the road. I kind of gravitated towards the MGB, and once again, I just love the way the MGB felt. Because it's a unibody type construction. They are old school. They don't have ABS, anti-lock braking system. They don't have traction control. So you really have to pay attention when you drive any of these old British sports cars. I've kind of gravitated towards the MGB GT. I love them both, but for some reason I just really like driving the MGB GT. And I've always been into cars, and I'm also passionate about racing, and I always wanted to get into vintage racing, and I absolutely love the raw feel of driving a vintage sports car.
The Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix is a 10-day car festival that commemorates the history of the automobile and motorsports racing. Every year during the middle of July, right in the backyard of Pittsburgh, this one-of-a-kind event includes various car shows, countryside tours, and 2 vintage race weekends at Pittsburgh International Race Complex in Pittsburgh's iconic Schenley Park, keeping the event free to the public while raising awareness and donating 100% of the profits to the Pittsburgh Autism Society and the Allegheny Valley School.
The Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix has done for Pittsburgh, has put autism on the map, caused appropriate programs for people with autism and related disorders of communication and behavior, has enabled awareness of it to skyrocket, far beyond anything anybody could have imagined. But you cannot buy that advertising and that promotion. And every year it's done, every year, with volunteers and sponsors.
We have dozens and dozens of projects every year that are funded by grants from the Grand Prix that come to us because of the successful events each year. And we are just so grateful to the volunteers, the sponsors, and everybody involved with the Grand Prix for their dedication, their commitment to making this a huge success for the charities.
The grand finale of the event is the 2-day race in Schenley Park, which is the only race in the entire country that still races vintage cars on city streets. The Grand Prix did not start out as a 10-day car celebration. It began as a 1-day vintage car race that transformed into a world-class racing festival.
The whole history of the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix is a remarkable one. But it had very unlikely beginnings. A race car driver named Art McGovern and his friend Mary Beth Kmitter came to my office and said they wanted to talk about their hopes to race vintage cars in Schenley Park. And I says, why come to me? I have the kind of automobile they don't allow in Mount Lebanon after 6 o'clock. They said, well, it's because you're involved with the charity of the Autism Society of Pittsburgh. And the next thing we know, the thing was planned and ready to go. It took 3 months. Then on September 3rd, 1983. We had 70 cars, 75 cars lined up, and 4 or 5 different categories of races. It was a great first start, and the race went on.
From there, the event grew. Gaining more support and volunteers allowed the Grand Prix to add event after event, eventually adding another race weekend to the festival. Pittsburgh International Race Complex, also known as Pitt Race, located in Wampum, Pennsylvania, is home to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix historic race weekend. This world-class racing facility includes a 2.8-mile racing circuit, vehicle dynamics area, and a go-kart track.
All the drivers that I've spoken with are very excited about having a track in this region to compete on that is complex and challenging.
We say in racing it's got good flow to it, so you can really set yourself up to do well in it if you can race consistently and keep yourself together.
This race weekend serves a purpose: to showcase some of the more powerful race cars that need a bigger circuit and runoff room to demonstrate their abilities, as well as give the other race car drivers an opportunity to push themselves and their race cars a bit more without the consequences of the unforgiving elements of the Schenley Park racetrack.
Schenley Park, as amazing as it is, it's hard to race, quote unquote, here. Pit race is obviously a racetrack, so you can get after a drive really hard and very spiritedly there, which is not as easy to do here.
Yeah. Pit race is a very challenging course. It has lots of elevation change in it, lots of distance. It's almost 2.8 miles long. Surface is great, but the big thing is there's a lot of runoff area.
A lot of
runoff.
You
can make a mistake and not pay a high dividend.
Throughout the race weekend, cars are able to participate in 3 practice sessions, 2 qualifying sessions, and 1 22-minute featured race. Chris Longo, racing his 1968 MGB GT, participated in Race Group 4, production and sports cars under 2 liters. During one of his practice sessions, he believed something was oddly wrong with his car, which is an often occurrence with these vintage cars. After returning to his pit stall, he was able to track down the source of the problem.
The car was running much slower than the previous year, and I couldn't figure out why. It didn't change too much, and I'm wondering, okay, why am I 5 seconds slower? And I noticed that the car wasn't revving as much as it did last year. It was only revving so much. Apparently race fuel does go bad, especially and mainly if it's in a plastic container. So I figured this all out. Long story short, drained the fuel cell, put fresh race fuel in, and then the car came alive. And I said, okay, now this starts to make sense. Now it's running the way it should.
One of the unique opportunities the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix offers is the Candies Charity Rides. With a donation to the Grand Prix charities, spectators can get a chance to jump into a vintage race car with a driver to experience what it's like to race around the track. As drivers prepared themselves for the 22-minute featured race, they hit the track, eager to push their cars to the limits on this unique track. While some were not so lucky. Chris Longo managed to qualify in a respectable position heading into his featured race. With new race fuel in his MGB GT, he set a new personal best lap time and his car successfully endured the 22-minute race. Just east of downtown Pittsburgh, the Walnut Street Invitational Car Show kicks off the Grand Prix week of events on Monday night. This free-to-the-public car show includes over 125 invited rare and classic cars that line the city streets. The rain could not stop these car enthusiasts from coming to this stylish and laid-back car show in Pittsburgh's shady side. Even Chris Longo showed up in his 1974.5 V8 MGB GT. Eventually, the rain stopped. Cars were wiped down, making it a beautiful night on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. Once homed to the iconic Homestead Steel Mills, the Grand Prix holds a car cruise on Tuesday night in Homestead's Waterfront Shopping Center. With just a $5 donation to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix charities, anyone can bring down their own ride for a night of checking out cars and swapping car stories. The free event to the public allows individuals to check out over 500 hot rods, race cars, motorcycles, modern and classic cars. Around lunchtime on Wednesday, cars hit the downtown streets of Pittsburgh in the downtown parade and car display. After the parade, cars were on display in Pittsburgh's Market Square, PPG Plaza, and the US Steel Plaza, making it a great lunch break activity for the Pittsburgh workers, while promoting the Grand Prix's upcoming events. Later that afternoon, race and show cars line up along Pittsburgh's Roberto Clemente Bridge for the annual tune-up at Atria's. The public event showcases over 150 cars, with Pittsburgh's striking city skyline in the background.
Usually you're on this bridge, you're going to see a baseball game, but tonight we have what a great car show for the city of Pittsburgh. This whole bridge is lined up with great cars this year. It's yearly tradition here down in Pittsburgh, and it's really great this year. The turnout's unbelievable. We have a beautiful night, and the car collection is top-notch. It's unbelievable.
Once the sun began to set, the true beauty of these exotic and vintage cars really stood out under the Pittsburgh lights. The Grand Prix headed to scenic Westmoreland County on Thursday for the annual Countryside Tour. Starting out in Ligonier, vintage cars travel in groups of 3 or 4 throughout the beautiful, windy backcountry roads. Exercising the passion of grand touring by driving these vintage classics as they were intended to do so. On Friday, the main preparation for the race weekend in Schenley Park is underway. Racers complete last-minute maintenance checks, register for the event, followed by a mandatory driver's meeting.
Standing yellow, there's a problem that's been there. A yellow means you got to come off the race pace a little bit, and you can't pass after that yellow, and you can't pass until you get to the next station where there is no yellow. If you break down on the track, number one, if it's oil, please take a look and make sure your oil gauge works.
First-time drivers must complete a track walk with instructors pointing out the potential hazards of the unique racing circuit.
It's not the fast line.
3 out of 4 laps, I lose the back end coming around this.
While last-minute track preparations are underway, all of the drivers take their race cars down the road to Squirrel Hill for the annual Forbes Avenue of Speed parade and driver's reception. This free event allows the public to get a chance to meet the drivers and see the race cars firsthand before the race weekend. These quiet city streets of Schenley Park come to life during the annual 2-day Schenley Park Car Show and Race Weekend. This weekend is the nation's largest vintage racing event and the only one that runs on city streets. Overlooking the vintage race, Schenley Park's Bob O'Connor Golf Course hosts the International Car Show, displaying around 3,000 modern and vintage cars.
That it's a beautiful setting. There's a wonderful car show over on the golf course, and you get to walk around the paddock and see all these cars, paddock like they would have been in the olden days. People drove their cars, a lot of them to the track, they parked along the side of the road, and they went racing for Saturday and Sunday. A lot of them would put the windshield back on the car and drive home if they didn't have any accidents. So it's the vintage feel of this. It's the only race that I'm aware of held on the city streets.
This one-of-a-kind 2.33-mile circuit displays a combination of both beauty and danger at the same time.
Well, Schenley's is especially challenging and terrifying, and any mishap at Schenley Park, you're going to be spinning into a curb or a stone wall, and you might be on a bridge that's 400 feet down to the ground.
What's nice about the track here, and you hear two different schools of thought, where some people would say, I would never race on this course, and then there's other people that won't miss the opportunity.
During the Schenley Park weekend, drivers get the opportunity to participate in 2 practice sessions, 1 qualifying session, and 1 8-lap race. While the race cars hit the track, car shows are hitting the grass at the International Car Show. In addition to being a great vantage point for the race, this show features over 20 different car displays divided by country of the manufacturers throughout the golf course. All the way from British to Italian, German, and American. This show welcomes anyone with a car, all makes, models, and years, with a small donation to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix charities. Once again, the Grand Prix holds the Candies charity rides for spectators to experience this one-of-a-kind Schenley Park racing circuit. On Sunday, the featured 8-lap race is held. Drivers put on a great show for over 100,000 spectators lining the course. Chris Longo, racing in Race Group 4, had a competitive race through the 8 laps. With his car running smoothly, Chris finished the race towards the top of his class.
The Grand Prix went phenomenal, I think, for everyone. Personally, it went excellent for me. Old number 7, I ran it in every practice, qualifying, and race event that the Grand Prix had for my class. And I believe it was about 10 heats. And the car ran start to finish flawlessly. I couldn't have been happier, so that's going to be a strong goal for next year.
Each year, the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix grows in size. Beginning as a one-day vintage car race, transforming into one of the largest and most unique vintage racing festivals in the country.
Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. Nothing like it in the country.
And so many people, even Pittsburghers, don't know about this event. Even the people that are into cars don't know about this event.
I'm not going there. That's just too much traffic, too many people. It's worth the trip.
I mean, this is old cars. This is old school. This is the way racing used to be in the old days, not like it is now. You know, everything's all, it's all publicity and it's all that. It's all commercial, that's what it is. This is old time racing, vintage car racing. And that's what's great. You bring young kids here, they can see what it was like in the old days.
As the demographic of car enthusiasts begin to change, some believe the history of vintage cars is slowly being erased.
There may be none of these cars about because there's no home for them anymore, you know. This one event is exceptional because it does have a home for them, a legitimate home, and that's why so many of them are here.
It seems to be growing each year, and we keep acquiring newer cars, and it seems like we're acquiring more cars than cars are dropping off. So I look at that as an extreme positive.
By pushing the limits of maintaining and displaying these moving works of art, it's crazy to think that we are preserving the history of the automobile while supporting the families of Pittsburgh through what is found in these unique garages.